Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Before I introduce our speaker for this evening on parent sharing, supporting children in the digital age, I just wanted to let you know that we're not experiencing any technical difficulties, but if we do, please bear with us. Our next webinar is going to be held on Tuesday, the 13th of January, where the focus will be on allergies. This is going to be led by our medical and health and safety team. So as part of our series of parent carer webinars, we try and incorporate a wide range of topics. Today's speaker, Taliska, is an expert in the RSHE field. We work really closely with Taliska and the incredible team from Everyone's Invited on a series of different projects and initiatives suitable for the varying ages and stages of our pupils. Most recently, Taliska and the team visited Forest 2 weeks ago to speak to our Year 10s about navigating relationships. They will continue to speak to Year 10 over the course of the academic year, with a series of talks followed by workshops by the highly skilled Everyone's Invited facilitator team. The upcoming talks will focus on sexual well-being, rape culture, and pornography. We are really fortunate to have worked with Everyone's Invited since the education arm of the charity's inception, and we consider them part of the Forest family. Taliska, who will be speaking to you this evening, is the facilitation lead at Everyone's Invited. Taliska is a Teach First graduate who taught geography in an inner London secondary school and supported students as a Year 10 and 11 form tutor. She holds a PGCE with distinction and qualified teacher status. Taliska has over 4 years' experience in sexual violence prevention and is the founder of Urban Angels, a community focused on women and girls' safety. Through her role as facilitation leader at Everyone's Invited, Taliska combines her passion for teaching with her commitment to sexual violence prevention. I'm really looking forward to hearing her share her experience and expertise in this field with you all this evening. So thank you so much for coming to Forest to talk to us today. I will now hand over to Taliska.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. And I'm really looking forward to delivering this session today. So, as was so brilliantly introduced, I'm from Everyone's Invited, and I'll tell you a little bit about who we are and how we started and what our work is shortly. But just to kind of give you a little introduction about what we're going to be discussing today, we're going to be thinking about the world of our young people, our children, and a lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about this evening is drawn from responses from parents across the country about things that they are concerned about, specifically in relation to their children's lives, be that offline and also online. So before we get started, there is a space where you can leave comments, which I will get back to, just to flag to the team at Forest. I'm unable to see them currently, but if you would like to share them with me kind of on the private chat, anything that comes through, that would be brilliant. If you do have any questions throughout, please don't hesitate to pop them into the chat. Thank you so much, Miss Arthur. And if you do have anything you want to share or kind of ask about, nothing is off limits. I've had every question under the sun from parents. So it is a really non-judgmental space where we can have these discussions and I can share my experiences with you, having worked with young people, both in the capacity of a teacher and also now in my role at Everyone's Invited. Please check in with yourself. I know that we very often don't do that. We're always looking out for our children, looking after them, but actually take this time, whether you are joining us live today or you're watching this at a later date, to just check in with yourself about how you're feeling. Some of the topics that we discussed today might be a little bit triggering or overwhelming or upsetting. And, you know, if you need to leave at any point, take a breather, come back, that's absolutely fine. And please come in with an open mind and an open heart. We are not here to judge you. We are not here to tell you how to parent. We are simply here to share our experience and our expertise in the field and to really support you as you navigate your child's world. Because as we're going to find out, and I'm sure you already know, it's incredibly different to perhaps what you experienced when you were growing up with social media and the digital age and everything that comes with it, positives and negatives. So I'm hoping that you'll leave today with a lot more knowledge than you came in with, and reassurance and strategies and practical tips on how you can support your children moving forwards. So a little bit about Everyone's Invited. And as Miss Arthur said, we've had the pleasure to work with Forest for a number of years now with students. So it's really amazing to be able to speak to parents because, as we always say when we speak to schools, it's really about that wraparound approach. It's not just speaking to students and it's not just speaking to staff, but when they come home, it's so important that we have a united front to tackling these issues. Now, Everyone's Invited started as a grassroots activist movement in 2020, and it was started by Soma Sara, who is our founder, who you can see in the top right-hand side of the screen. Now, Soma and I are actually the same age, we're both 26, and in this time period, Soma had just graduated from university. And if you cast your mind back to 2020, it was an incredibly bizarre time. It was right in the height of lockdown. It was sort of that very weird period where loo roll was out of stock and people were stockpiling pasta. Very bizarre period of time. And really in that moment, the world stood still. And it allowed many of us to reflect on our lives. Many of us, it was a time of incredible struggle. For some of us, it was a time where we got to spend a lot of time with people that we perhaps didn't see very often. So there was varying experiences. For Soma, she spent much of that time speaking to her friends about her experiences in education, chatting to university friends about her great experiences and also not great experiences, and also with her school friends. And the experiences I'm speaking about are experiences that she had of sexual violence. And when she shared these with her friends, it was really the first time she'd actually spoken about these issues in detail. And of course, they were shocked, but when she had these discussions, what came up was that many of them had also had these experiences too. Perhaps they were too worried to speak about them. They felt it was too taboo. They felt ashamed. They felt embarrassed. And actually, for a lot of them, they thought it was normal. It was this idea of, oh, yeah, these things happen to everyone. It's just the way it is, you know. And that really shocked Soma because she thought, gosh, these things that have happened to me and to my friends, they are not normal. They are incredibly harmful and they have a lasting impact on physical, mental health and how we perceive ourselves and others. And so she wanted to generate this conversation, which clearly wasn't being had. So in the same year, 2020, she went to Instagram. She went to her account. She wasn't an influencer. She was a normal person, just like you and I. And she shared very bravely her story to her Instagram story. And went to sleep that night, not expecting much of it. Thought she might have a couple of messages here and there of solidarity, but she had an overwhelming response from people. Lots and lots of messages of people saying, thank you so much. You know, you've inspired me to share my story too. Lots of people asking her to share their story anonymously. And also just lots of people saying, wow, this conversation was really needed. You know, I've got friends that have gone through this. I've got family members or, you know, people in their lives. And it seemed that everyone knew someone that had gone through this, yet it was a conversation which wasn't being had. So it was a really brilliant moment where someone thought, actually, now's my chance to do something about this. So her and her friends set up Everyone's Invited's website. And you can see it in the middle of the screen here where it says survivor testimonies. Now, our website has got other aspects to it now, such as our education program. But initially, it was just a space for survivors to come of any age, of any gender, to be able to share their experience of sexual violence anonymously. Now, you might be thinking, well, why? What's the purpose of this? Well, actually, research that we've done with therapists and you know the survivors that have shared their stories have said this is an incredibly cathartic space. It's a space where perhaps it's the first time that we've ever shared this experience with anyone. It feels safe, it's anonymous, and you know, if you cast your mind back to a time where perhaps you were carrying something that felt heavy on your shoulders, heavy on your chest, just sharing that with someone, regardless of whether it's a stranger or someone you love and care about, it kind of takes that load off, it takes that weight off. So it was an incredibly powerful space and still is to this day. And we've had over 52,000 testimonies submitted to our website. So far, we have a wonderful team of volunteers who go through and they take out any identifiable information and they share those stories to the website. And we've had testimonies from children primary school age all the way up to kind of people in their 80s or 90s who it might be the first time that they've ever told anybody about this experience that happened when they were in school. Now, when we looked through all these testimonies, we started to see a trend, and that trend was that many of these experiences shared were happening in educational institutions, be that schools, even primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, and universities. And so we wanted to do a little bit of investigative work to work out, well, where is this happening? Is there a trend? Is it in private schools? Is it in state schools? Is it in London? Is it in the north, the south? Is it just in state? Is it in single sex schools or mixed gender schools? So we asked people who were submitting their stories to share one piece of identifiable information, that being, if they wanted to, the name of the educational institution or workplace or wherever the experience happened. And we received an influx of school names, of university names, of primary school names to our website. What we did with this information was we collated it into a list of around 6,000 primary, secondary, colleges and universities in our first schools list release. And we decided to release it. We released it to the press, we released it online on social media. Now, as you can imagine, that caused a lot of backlash. It was it was incredibly controversial at the time. There was just a list of school names. As you can imagine, schools felt incredibly worried about if they were on there, what had been said. And, as I said, it was really controversial. What I think is interesting, and having been a teacher myself at the time, it was a time of fear of, oh my gosh, are we on this list? What's going on? But actually, what it showed was, gosh, this is happening in a lot of places. And even the schools that weren't on the list, that may just be that someone hasn't submitted their testimony or doesn't know about us. What we also found to be very interesting is when we plotted all the schools onto a map of the UK, that it wasn't just happening in a cluster in one area. It was happening up and down the country at all levels of education in all types of schools. What this said to us was, this is a culture, this is a society-wide issue. It's not a finger-pointing blame game. It's not an individual school. It really is permeating all of society and all educational institutions. And what was really brilliant is it sparked this national conversation. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen, it was front page of the Times newspaper. People were talking about this issue that previously had been swept under the rug or a little bit taboo, or kind of, don't talk about these things. Now it was being spoken about with the kind of rigor and tenacity that this issue needs. Off the back of this, what was really incredible was Ofsted, who go and investigate schools and give them ratings, decided to do a rapid review into sexual violence and sexual abuse in schools. And they asked young people, is this actually going on? What is happening? Are these testimonies accurate? Is this your lived experience? And what they found in 2021, that yes, this was their lived experience. This was happening across the country. And these are some of the statistics that came out of this Ofsted report. Now, we show these statistics to students as well. We give them a chance to read it through. And then we ask students, are you surprised by these statistics? We get them to do 3, 2, 1, thumbs up if you're surprised, thumbs down if you're not surprised. Now, I'm sure you've got an idea of what students might say. And it is that they are not surprised by these statistics. We have maybe 5 to 10 thumbs down to say that they're surprised. Thumbs up to say that they're surprised in cohorts of 400, 500 students at times, which shows that this is the lived experience of most students, or at least how they perceive their world. So you can see, again, these statistics are incredibly harmful. 90% of girls, 50% of boys say they receive explicit pictures or videos of things they did not want to see a lot or sometimes. This is hugely concerning. We're going to talk more about intimate image-based abuse later on. You can see the middle statistic, again, very high percentages around sexist name calling, and 40% of 13 to 15-year-olds said unwanted touching occurred a lot or sometimes. Now, of course, it's worth noting that this is in 2021, and we've moved on a few years from then, but actually we're seeing sexual violence statistics kind of on the rise, unfortunately. So I suspect that these statistics will be relevant or the same today, if not worse. So as, to set the scene, of course, that feels very heavy, that feels very intense, probably quite alarming as parents. And hopefully tonight, I'm going to share this knowledge with you and give you the tools to feel really confident that you have such an incredibly powerful role alongside school in really tackling this culture. And of course, we're equipping and empowering students themselves to tackle this culture with the sessions that we're delivering, with the talks and the workshops at Forest. Now, I sent out a survey at the beginning of this academic year, and I asked parents, well, I'd like to know, what are you concerned about? Because perhaps it's different to the things that your children are concerned about. These were the answers that came up, and actually they really nicely map onto the talks that we delivered to students. We had things around pornography, peer pressure, AI, social media, influencers, online misogyny, and consent. And we're going to explore some of these topics today. But to start off, I think it's really nice to circle back to our children. Now, I also asked children across the country, well, what do you wish your parents knew? We're obviously growing up in completely different generations. What do you wish they knew being on your shoes today? And these were 3 key themes that came out of that question. I think the middle one is one I want to draw your attention to. The need for them to feel safe to have these conversations with you. And of course, this comes from setting up that culture at home where they can come and talk to you about these issues, which isn't always easy to do. And as we know, teenagers, they get to that age where they don't want to tell you about things. Things feel awkward, things feel uncomfortable. So we're going to think about how we can navigate that today. Other things that came up was that, perhaps a lot of things that I'm going to show you tonight, you'll probably be thinking, what on earth? Or this is really abnormal, or what is going on? But actually, this is their new normal. This is their lived experience. So it's about really putting yourselves into their shoes, really wanting to learn and understand what their lives are like, and empathizing with them. And also when we kind of think about social media later on, the fact that a lot of these trends that they're getting sucked into that are informing their behaviors, their belief patterns, their perceptions of themselves, their perceptions of others are very subtle. And we're going to talk about how messaging is drip fed on social media. It's not quite as explicit as we might think, but the impacts are still the same. So to start off with, and I'm not sure, Miss Arthur, if you're able to kind of give me an idea, but if you're a parent and you're on the live webinar this evening, I would love to know if you yourself have a TikTok account. So if you want to type into the comments, if you're able to, yes or no. So yes, if you have TikTok, no, if you don't. And Miss Arthur, if you could just give me a kind of a rough estimate, how many parents do, how many parents don't, if anyone kind of responds. So I'll leave it for about 5 to 10 seconds and then we'll go from there. Okay, well, I'll carry on, and if we get any response in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so TikTok. I thought it's really useful for us to start off by kind of diagnosing the platforms. Oh, okay, I can see them now. Thank you. I've got one comment saying no. Okay, so as I said, let's set the scene with the social media platforms that our children are engaging with the most. We're going to look through TikTok and we're going to look through Snapchat. So TikTok, the legal age that a young person can have a TikTok account is 13. And as we can see from the statistics, young people are spending an incredibly long time on TikTok per day, more than any other children in any other country. And actually, if you look to the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that not only are they spending a long time on TikTok, but actually that it's their primary news source. So it's where they're getting a lot of their information about the world, and it's obviously shaping their belief systems as well. So what does TikTok look like? Well, just to give you an overview of when you open up the app, what you can see on the phone screen on the screen today is what it would look like if you opened up a TikTok account. Now, this is a screenshot from my account. Now, to draw your attention to a couple of things, if you look at the top bar, the kind of bar across the top with the white writing, the For You page. Now, this kind of feed, which on TikTok is always a vertical feed. So essentially, when you go onto the app, you swipe upwards. There's no kind of left or right, really. You just swipe along to go to the next post. And it's kind of an endless vertical feed, primarily of videos, but now you can also upload a series of photos, which you can swipe across. The For You page is the most popular page on TikTok. And it essentially is a page of content, often from people you don't know or you don't follow. And it's curated by an algorithm. The algorithm picks up on things that you engage with, things that you like, things that you comment on, things that you share, even the amount of time that you spend watching a specific video. And it goes, this person likes this content, whether it's about animals or whether it's about, interior design or whatever it might be. It picks up on it and it says, let me feed this person with more of similar content that I think they like. So you might assume, based on this screenshot, that perhaps I've watched or liked lots of videos to do with rom-coms or films, and it suggested that to me. And we're going to see why this is particularly interesting later, and actually what the algorithm suggests or sends to children based on their gender and their age can be quite fascinating. The like is represented by a heart icon. You can see the white heart icon on the right-hand side. Comment, speech bubble, save is the kind of bookmark, and share is the arrow. Save means you can access it more easily from your page. It's like almost like a folder. And share, you can send it within TikTok to your friends. You can send it over email, over Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, wherever. So that's kind of what the screen looks like. Now, let's think about some of the harms of TikTok. Just briefly going back a slide, actually. Alongside the For You page at the top, you can also have friends, which is people that you follow and follow you back. And then following is simply people that you follow that don't follow you back. For example, celebrities you might follow. Now, with that in mind, what are some of the harms that we might face on TikTok and that our children might face? Now, brilliantly, and it is improving over time, TikTok does have community guidelines that removes harmful content that it sees coming up on the platform, whether that be around self-harm or suicide or eating disorders. However, sometimes this content can slip through the net and it can still come up on their feeds. But actually, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, if you explicitly type in particular types of content. So you can see here I've put eating disorder. It will actually block the search, and rather than showing videos, it will display a support message. As you can see, it will display a button that says view resources, which means that your child can access support resources, and even a helpline that you can see at the bottom of the screen. Now, to kind of talk you through, well, how does this slip through the net? How does the community guidelines not catch this content? Well, there's lots of interesting ways. Firstly, language is really important on TikTok. To give you an example, when people want to talk about suicide, for example, on TikTok, instead of using that word, which they know will get flagged by the community guidelines, they use the term unalived, because that doesn't get flagged. Or if they want to talk about sex, they will use the term SEGGS, segs, or like an egg emoji. Why? Because that's not the same word. It doesn't get flagged. So there are loopholes. There are clever ways to get around these parameters. But if they're explicitly searching for things, you can kind of have some level of reassurance that a lot of it will get blocked and removed. There is also the possibility, and I would recommend kind of exploring this. You don't necessarily need to utilize it, but especially if your child is potentially getting TikTok at 13 or they're kind of getting it for the first time, they do have parental tools. To caveat this, or to kind of pause as it says on the screen, it's really important when we think about that, creating that safe space with our children, that if you do choose to use parental tools to kind of manage or support their account, that you do this with their knowledge and you do it in collaboration with them. Because, you know, the last thing you want to do is put parental tools in place, your child doesn't know, and then that immediately breaks that trust and they won't talk to you about things in the future. So make sure that you're doing this with them, that you're very transparent about it. But there are lots of tools you can set. You can set daily screen times. You could say maybe you're only giving them half an hour in the evenings before it kind of blocks the app from being able to be clicked on. You can see what content they report. You can filter keywords of videos that they might see. You can also manage their settings, like who can view their profile, who they can follow, those types of things. There's more information, more detailed information on this in the resources that will be shared with you after this talk. So if you are interested, please go and read in more detail through those links. But there are lots of tools available that will help you to kind of ease your child into using social media in a more managed way and in a way that might give you a little bit more reassurance, or kind of able to guide them through it if it's their first time having this app. Okay, we're going to move on to Snapchat now. So again, Snapchat is one that, you know, most parents don't have. Interestingly, I've done about 7 parent talks this month, and some parents have actually got Snapchat, and I asked them why they have it, because it's quite uncommon for parents or for ages of parents to have Snapchat. And a lot of them said that they actually got it to communicate with their children, which I thought was really interesting, and, you know, really great that they're kind of moving into the spaces where they communicate. So Snapchat, again, 13 is the legal age. And again, young people are spending a lot of time on it a day, around 97 minutes. So slightly less than TikTok. What I will say is that Snapchat is kind of like their key messaging platform. So whilst we might use text messages, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, this is like their prime place to go to send each other text messages, pictures, videos, etc. And we're going to see what that screen looks like now. So as you can see on the left-hand side, that is kind of what your app will look like when you open it up, when you go into your messages. So you can see you've got kind of the icons, or like the little emojis of the people, their names, and then you can see a series of icons. So the icon is either blue, purple, or red. What does that mean? Blue means a text message, so a typed written message. Red means a photo. Purple means a video. If the icon is filled in, it means that it's been sent to you and it's been unopened. So for example, if you look on the left-hand side where it says Jason L at the top of the phone screen, you can see that's a new chat. It's got a filled icon, which is blue. It means it's a text message, and it means it's unopened. If you notice Tim W, if you go down, that's red, so that's a photo. You have sent that photo and you can see that it's filled in, so that means it's unopened. What does it look like if it's been opened? If you go down to Taylor R at the bottom, you can see a blue icon, which means a text message, but you can see it's clear in the middle. That means that has been opened. Purple is a video, so you can see Ashley has sent a video. Great. What are the harms of Snapchat? What are the things that I think you should be aware of as parents? Well, the whole concept or the allure of Snapchat is this idea that it is a disappearing messages app. So that's the whole premise that it was kind of sold to the world for. And, if you know the icon of Snapchat, which I believe is on this screen here, you can see this white ghost. The whole concept of Snapchat is that you send a message and it disappears and it almost can't be tracked. So that was kind of exciting, as you can imagine, for young people. Oh, I send this video, I send this photo, and then it's gone away forever. Oh my gosh, this is great. As we know, with the realities of the internet, that is not the case. If you send a text message, you send a photo, you send a video on Snapchat, it doesn't mean that it can't be screenshotted, it can't be screen recorded, or it can't be saved. Now, to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. So if someone is to screenshot a photo that you send them, because on Snapchat, if you send a photo, it might be sent for 10 seconds and then vanish. Someone can screenshot it. Now, if someone screenshots a photo, a chat, or a video on Snapchat, you will see, it will tell you they've screenshotted it or screen recorded it, for example. So you can see the icons on the far right-hand side of the screen. We've got the red icon, the kind of arrows going both ways, the same for the blue and the same for the purple. And you can see what each of them mean. However, as with everything on the internet, there are ways around it. If the person's phone is on airplane mode and they screenshot, screen record, or take a screenshot of the text message, it actually doesn't always notify you. So let's say you send an image of yourself and you think it's safe, you send it for 10 seconds, it's gone. Oh, there's no screenshot kind of symbol that's come up. Great, it's fine. It could have still been screenshotted or screen recorded. Another thing to consider with Snapchat is there's something called Snap Maps. So if you see the kind of second image along, on Snapchat, there is a function where you can essentially see the location of people you are friends with on the map. Now, by default, only your friends can see you, which is great. But, what is impressive, but also quite harmful about this function is that you can see the exact location of people on the map. So you can see on the photo here, you can see the street that they're on. And if you actually zoom into the map, you can even see the building that someone is in. And let's say it's a big school building, you can even see the part of the building that person is in. It also tells you if that person is driving or flying, it puts them in a car or a plane. So it's very precise, very detailed. Now, I would strongly advise as parents, if your child does have Snapchat, to just turn that function off. And the way that you do this is to go onto ghost mode, which is what it's called, and kind of relates to the fact that Snapchat is a ghost. Now, if you look on that map here, you can see that there's a blue circle over this person's face. That means that they are on ghost mode. That means nobody can see their location. I personally feel, and you may feel differently, that nobody needs to know the exact location of your child at all times, regardless of whether they're a friend or not. And I think it opens them up to potential harms. The reason why I think it does that is it's not always just their friends seeing their location. Why? We're now going to talk about quick add. So you can see at the top of the screen this concept of quick add. How I would compare it is when you go on Facebook, for example, and it brings up suggested friends. So it might be, your husband, your wife, your friend is friends with someone from down the road, and it might bring them up because you've got mutual friends. It says, oh, actually, you've got 5 people that are friends with this person that you know. So you might know them. Would you like to add them? The same thing happens on Snapchat. So it will bring up a list of people that maybe have mutual friends with some of your other friends. And all you have to do is click the add button that you can see next to where it says Sydney Campbell. Click add. The other person still has to accept your kind of friend request, but this can be harmful. Why? Snapchat is a really prime location for grooming, for sextortion, for image-based abuse. Adults can come onto Snapchat, they can type in usernames, find children, essentially. And then let's say your child has Snapchat, another child in the class has Snapchat, and that friend adds a stranger. Your child goes on to Snapchat the next day, they see, oh, there's a young girl or a young boy. Oh, my friend from class is mutual friends with them. I guess I'll add them. And, even I did this growing up. It's like, oh, they've got 20 mutual friends with me. They must be from a school nearby. They must have been at a house party I was at. They must be friends with my friends. I guess I'll just add them. Sometimes I don't think about that. But then what does that person have access to? They have access to message you, to send you photos, to send you videos. And if you've got your maps turned on, they have access to your exact location at all times. So my advice on this would be, Make your children aware that quick add can be dangerous. And secondly, make sure that their snap maps are on ghost mode. And, I'm not often giving prescriptive advice on what I think you should do, but on this occasion, I think with the location sharing, it's such a fragile piece of sensitive information that if a stranger has your child's exact location at all times, can be used in a really harmful way. So I think it's worth mentioning. Great. So that's kind of an overview of Snapchat and TikTok, the platforms that they use. And of course, it's not a full walkthrough. I would advise you, even if you don't want to kind of have a full account, it's always useful to just download it, explore it, to understand kind of what they're seeing day in, day out. But we're now going to kind of loop back and think a little bit about ourselves. And we're going to be thinking about the culture that's in society today and maybe how we got here and what underpins it. And ultimately, the kind of foundation of all of these issues is peer pressure and gendered expectations. So we're going to be thinking about that now. So I'm just going to give you 10 seconds, whether you're live or whether you're watching this as a recording, to just reflect on your own experience of childhood. What peer pressures did you experience growing up, related to your gender or just in general? And to give you an example, one we get very often is smoking, for example. So I'll just give you sort of 10 seconds to think about that now. I think it's always interesting to reflect back on perhaps how things have changed, or perhaps how things are still the same. So, some of the things you might have been thinking about is the pressure to get into a relationship, drinking culture, partying culture, designer clothes, all sorts of issues like this. Alcohol, thank you for the comment. Yeah, all of these issues, some of which, like smoking, aren't quite the same as they used to be, although vaping has almost replaced that now. Some are very similar to what they were in the past when it comes to drinking culture, relationships, masculinity, what it is to be a woman, all these types of issues. It's nothing new. We can see some of these, not particularly old, but a few years back now, some ads which show these gendered expectations, these gendered pressures, even down to things like colours, or you can see in the middle around women's role in the home, or even this very fascinating Marks and Spencer's display where we've got kind of men and women side by side. On the men's side, it says must have outfits to impress, and it's a 3-piece suit. And then on the flip side, we've got must have fancy little knickers for women. So again, this idea of, what it is to be a woman or what it is to be a man, what's expected of us. And these pressures play a big role in how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive others, and also how we treat others, which kind of creates, as we'll see, this negative culture around sexual violence that we see across the UK. So these are some of the gendered pressures when we talk to students that they come up with. So we ask them, if you think about the words masculinity and femininity, what things spring to mind? And these are some of the terms that they come up with. And this is the stereotypical ideals of masculinity and femininity. So it's not necessarily what they agree with, but it's just what they hear or what they see on social media, on the news, in movies and films. And, if you look at these words right now, I'm sure immediately you have a gender that comes to mind. If I say the word strong, most students immediately think of masculinity. If I say the word classy, immediately femininity springs to mind. Breadwinner is a concept around masculinity that comes up a lot. So there's these stereotypes or these expectations or pressures or ideals around our gender, which, have been ingrained for as long as we really can remember. And we're going to see how actually they haven't changed, but they've just become repackaged in different ways on social media. And, it becomes even more interesting and dynamic when we think about, in this age, students who identify as gender fluid or non-binary or transgender students, how this also complicates, our concepts of gender, and also makes it even more challenging for students to understand what their role is or what expectations or pressures are on them. So it's an incredibly interesting and complex topic, but I just wanted you to kind of have a think about how these pressures can then influence how our children are behaving and how they think about themselves. Now, as I said, these pressures are nothing new. These pressures have been around since the beginning of time. I'm sure you can all think of adverts on TV, maybe talking about weight or body image, or, making lots of money. Perhaps it's a billboard or an advert on the side of a bus stop. They've been around forever. They really haven't changed that much. They just look quite different now. And what I mean by that is, as you can see on the screen, they're all over social media. And now, instead of being a static image, they're a video. Instead of being a celebrity, they're your everyday person talking about it, or an influencer talking about it. What's the difference? Well, I think we can all agree the intensity or the saturation at which our children are engaging with these pressures and expectations is just incredibly increased from what it was before. Like I said, for example, let's say you see a weight loss advert on the side of a bus stop when you're driving past it. You see it, it has an impact on you. Maybe you feel a certain way about it. You might think about it for a few minutes, but it's gone. If you then want to do something about it, let's say you want to take some diet pills or start buying protein powder or whatever it might be, you then have to go home, you have to research it, you might have to go into the shops in town, you have to plan your day around it. It takes a lot more effort. In today's society, what do you have to do? Well, you go online. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos on weight loss and dieting, for example. You're watching them back to back. The longer you spend watching them, the more the algorithm goes, this person is interested in this topic. Let me feed them more videos. So it's almost like, if you were to think back, it's almost like you see a billboard, you look at it, and that billboard goes, this person likes it. And then when you're driving home, you see 10 more billboards. That's almost the equivalent of what it's like now. But then to make it even more interesting, we're seeing social media platforms like TikTok introduce e-commerce. What I mean by that is they are now allowing you to shop for the products being promoted on social media. What does this look like? Well, for example, on any one of these videos, let's say the one of the woman eating with a spoon, it might be she says, I've tried this really great dieting powder. What she can then do is link it in the bottom of the video, and all that person has to do is watch the video, go, I want to be like that, click on the link, put it in their basket, can pay within TikTok, and get it shipped straight to their door. So you can see how that cycle or that process has become shortened, and also the saturation at which young people are seeing these videos has increased massively. As we've seen on TikTok, an average of 127 minutes per day of them being fed this content, for some students even more. Now, what does it actually look like? Well, when I talk to you about these trends, you're going to say, well, yeah, it's all we've been around. So when we think towards the left-hand side of the screen, we think about masculinity, it's often around body image and fitness and money-making hustle culture. And again, this links back to this idea of men being strong, men being dominant, men being breadwinners. We can see how it all ties into these expectations and stereotypes. So on the left-hand side, the idea of bulking and cutting, this is where you kind of put on lots of weight to build muscle and then shred that weight off to reveal your abs or your muscles. There is an influencer on the middle of the screen. The topless influencer is incredibly popular. He's got millions and millions of followers. Whenever we show his videos to students, pretty much all of them know who he is, Ashton Hall. He creates a lot of content around fitness, around making money, around kind of quite crazy morning routines where he wakes up at 3 a.m., goes to the gym, works on 10 businesses, And then to kind of build on that, this idea of hustle culture or the grind or, being a breadwinner, making lots of money, it's still the same today, this expectation that men should be wealthy from a young age. Examples here, steps to become a millionaire in your 20s. We saw it with kind of the rise of Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, Forex trading schemes. You see it all across social media, kind of ways to make money quickly and ways to become more wealthy. The fact that you need to be wealthy kind of before you've even finished your teenage years. So lots of pressures coming from lots of different angles. And for femininity, similar things, often around body image, around beauty, around physical appearance. So it might look like what I eat in a day. It might look like glow up tips, how to become better looking, how to do your hair better, your makeup better. So you can see similar pressures, just repackaged, perhaps more glossy, perhaps more entertaining. They often are short form, they're very snappy, they use kind of trending music, they're entertaining. So you can see why they get sucked into these, because it's the pressures that they're already feeling from all across society, but it's kind of packaged up into this exciting video with perhaps someone that you find inspiring, with lots of likes and comments underneath, kind of validating what's going on in that video. So it really is an incredibly powerful tool, which can be used for good, but can also be used to generate an incredible amount of pressure for young people. So how do we support them through this? And it might feel incredibly overwhelming, everything that I've just said, and understandably so. But actually, there are lots of things that we can do to support young people. especially as parents in the home, because we are an incredibly large role model, if not the largest role model for our young people. So how we behave and how we interact with them has a huge impact on how they see themselves and how they treat others. I want you to think about the language that you use at home. Do you use stereotypes language? Man up, grow a pair, don't throw like a girl, all of these words, which I know my parents had used with me growing up, and perhaps your parents had used with you, and perhaps you've even used at some point. Doesn't make you a bad parent. It's just the way that we've been brought up. It's the culture we've been brought up in. But it's really important to be conscious of the language you use and what that says to your children about how they're expected to behave. Again, thinking about gender expectations in your home. How do you split the household chores? Who sits at the head of the table if you have that dynamic? And what that says to them about themselves and about others. Making sure that you are modeling those positive behaviors and also challenging stereotypes when you hear or see them. Not just if your child says those stereotypes, but if you hear them on the radio, when you're in the car with them, if it's on a TV show that you're watching with them, if it's another child that you have and a sibling, for example, making a comment, making sure that you're not staying silent, because silence and complicity is almost just as bad as saying it yourself, because it says, well, we don't think it's wrong, we're not going to say anything. So really making sure that you challenge, and we'll talk about how you can do that in a way that doesn't shut them down, but rather kind of unpicks and is curious. Reflecting on your own beliefs, and we've got a really brilliant support resource that kind of helps you to get into your childhood and your experiences and how you were parented and how that now maps onto how you parent. So I think that's really brilliant if you have the opportunity to do that. And again, thinking about the media you consume. What music do you listen to? What kind of movies do you watch with them? Do you show diverse casts? Is it always male leads? What TV shows do you watch? How do the films that you consume kind of speak about women or depict women? Really important, subtle things, but can have a huge impact on their lives. Brilliant. So we're going to kind of delve into some different topics now. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. If you are watching this kind of catching up and not watching it live, please feel free to drop myself an email at education@everyone'sinvited.uk, and I'll get back to you with a response. So pornography, another big topic that parents are concerned about. The average age that a young person first accesses pornography, that means kind of Google's searches for it, is 13. The average age a young person is exposed to pornography is 9, so significantly younger. Noting the difference between the word access and expose. Access means they are kind of seeking it out. Exposed could be that they have seen it without wanting to. And we're going to look at kind of how that happens shortly. It's really important that we build empathy around pornography and think about why young people try to access it, why they watch it. And actually the fact that this statistic here says that 50% of young people report feeling guilty or ashamed after watching pornography. So there's a lot of psychology and a lot of guilt and shame and fear that goes into pornography that we're going to talk about now. But actually we're going to try and understand why they watch it, how they're exposed to it, and what we can do to support them. So, why do young people watch pornography? Well, I'm sure you can think of many reasons. They're exploring their sexuality, especially if they're teenagers. Very common. They're going through puberty, their body, their hormones, their brain is changing. They're exploring relationships with people. So it's normal to be curious about sex. Do they really have the chance to learn about sex beyond biological states? Perhaps more so than when I was growing up or when you were growing up. But actually, this video to the left was one that my brother was telling me about, that he's now 28, that he watched during school. And this was the sex education that he had. It was a video of a sperm, as you can see here, dressed up as a groom, swimming a race, approaching an egg dressed up in a pink frilly dress. And that was the extent of sex education at that point in time. That wasn't even that long ago. And really, it just teaches them about the biological side of things. So they're curious. They want to understand, how does intimacy work? What does foreplay look like? What is sex like? How do I engage with a partner? How do I initiate? What does it feel like? What do I do with my hands? What do I do with my body? Understandably, they're curious. They want to know. And often they see porn as a tutorial for this because they're not being told about it anywhere else. So where else are they expected to turn to? And also there's the natural human thing of feeling a thrill from accessing something that is explicit, or that that you shouldn't be watching, or you've been told not to watch, that adrenaline that comes with it. So there's lots of reasons. Now, how do people access it, or how are they exposed to it? The first time a young person might see pornography might not be when they've searched it themselves. It might be a friend sends a link to a group chat. of a pornographic content. It could be pornographic pop-ups on the side of gaming platforms. It can also be, in some cases, on even things like YouTube Kids. So it's really important to be mindful of not just putting your child in front of a phone, thinking they're on YouTube Kids and thinking it's fine. There are unfortunately some disturbed people out there who do upload what might look like an episode of Peppa Pig, but in the middle it has some explicit content, whether it's violent or sexual. So it's really important to always review what videos they're watching online if you're going to give them a phone to watch something. Or on the safe side, just watch it through mainstream kind of TV channels. That's always safer. So there are lots of ways they can become exposed or see this content. Now, why can porn be harmful? Pornographic content or content showing sex isn't necessarily harmful in and of itself. And in fact, there are some websites, which is called ethical porn sites, where it's pornography with people in consensual relationships where they haven't been trafficked, where it's showing kind of healthy communication, loving relationships. They do exist. But unfortunately, the majority of mainstream pornographic websites show a lot of very violent pornography, and that's why it is harmful. You can see here 1 in 8 titles on mainstream pornography websites depict sexual violence. And this has an impact on young people. Of course, this might be the first time that they've seen or had any experience of what does sex look like, what does intimacy look like. So naturally, they're then taking this and then they're modeling it in their first interactions of sex and intimacy or relationships. And there is, unfortunately, substantial evidence between the association of use of pornography and then going on to perform harmful sexual behaviors towards women and girls. This is not necessarily because they are violent or because they are harmful children. It's because this is what they think is normal and this is what they think is okay. And so if we're not there kind of navigating them through that, understandably, this is the only kind of reference point that they have. And we see this kind of mapped onto reality. For example, 1 in 8 sexually active girls from 14 to 18 have experienced choking in sex. Again, it's not because we've brought up a generation of people that want to strangle others, but it's because they're seeing that in porn, they're seeing it in sex as something that's cool, that's desirable, that's wanted. And so they replicate it without knowing that it's harmful. So there are a lot of challenges around this. Now, there are some really brilliant legal changes that are being put in place. For example, Pornhub, which is one of the largest pornographic websites in the world. In the UK, the government have introduced government-approved age checks. So if you want to go onto the website, you have to approve you have to have your age approved by kind of legal government documents, ID, driving license, passport, whatever. They actually have seen a 77% decrease in traffic the last time that I checked on the news about this. However, as always, there's loopholes. Young people are very savvy. They know how to kind of work their way around these. And a lot of young people have VPNs. If you're not familiar with VPNs, it's basically a digital tool that you can download onto your phone, onto your laptop. And what it does is it makes your browser think you're in another country. So you could say, I want my Google to think I'm in America or in Japan or wherever it might be. So you can bypass UK regulations through that way. Also, the UK have now made strangulation in pornography illegal, which is another brilliant step off the back of some of the statistics I've just showed you. They are small steps. They're not solving the whole problem, but it's really positive movement towards kind of protecting young people from very kind of abnormal and harmful sexual behaviors that are becoming normalized through this type of content. Now, we're going to kind of build on this by thinking about AI and how that's now intersecting with pornography. AI stands for artificial intelligence, and we know that we're using it across a range of fields. You might be using it in your workplace yourself or just in your general life. Things like ChatGPT, Microsoft, I can't remember what it's called now. There's also a similar one for Microsoft integrations where it can sort of read through your emails and summarize them or write emails for you or answer your questions. People use it across a plethora of fields and it's very useful and it can be very beneficial and it can save lots of lives and be very, very positive. But like all technology, it can also be used in harmful ways, and we're seeing it being used in pornography. Now, the most common way it's used in pornography is in what we call deepfakes. A deepfake is where you take someone's face and you kind of merge it onto a video, or you create content that replicates that person. So it's used with AI. You can create audio, video, or pictures. And unfortunately, it's most often done to women. You can see an example at the bottom of the screen. This is not a sexually explicit example, but this is how it's been used politically, of Obama. The left side is the original video. The right side is created through AI. as you can see, it's incredibly realistic and really hard to decipher when something is real or not. Thankfully, on TikTok now, they're introducing a function where if you upload something that's been made with AI, it says made with AI. It's not 100% accurate, but it does help to kind of make that distinguishing element to it. As we can see on the stats, unfortunately, 96% of deepfakes are sexually explicit. So it's primarily being used for that. And almost all sexually explicit deepfakes are including women that have not consented to their images or their likeness being used. And when we think about it in the context of young people, this research, just a caveat, has been done in the US. We haven't got any research into the UK significantly at the moment, but I think it's still interesting. 1 in 8 young people know someone who has been the target of deepfake nudes, so having their face put onto sexually explicit content. And 1 in 8 young people know someone who has created that content, so they've taken a peer's or someone in their class's face and put it onto sexually explicit content. Just, I was quite shocked when I saw just how high it was. So we've spoken about deepfakes. There's also other ways that it works. So face swapping, which is where you literally take someone's face and swap it. It's a little bit less sophisticated. There's also a rise of AI chatbots, AI avatars. So you can see on the middle picture there, the AI girlfriend. So there was actually a really interesting article released recently about the fact that young boys are relying a lot more on AI chatbots and AI avatars for friendships and romantic relationships and the impact that might have on them. And as we've spoken about, deepfakes. Now, there are a plethora of platforms that young people can use to create this content: Photoshop, Canva, also AI platforms, and platforms like Deepface and Anime Lab, which are primarily used for deepfake content. If you've ever used Photoshop, it's used for all sorts of things, marketing jobs, finance jobs, the whole shebang. But Deepface and Anime Lab are more specifically for deepfakes. So if you see your child's downloaded them, maybe you just ask them a little bit about what they're using it for, how they found it, etc. So how do we support young people through pornography and through the rise of AI pornography? Well, I think it's really important to start with an empathetic approach. As we said, if we want to have these complex, often awkward conversations with them, we need to really create this safe space. And I think we might feel the tendency, if we see our young person accessing pornography or accessing AI type of stuff, to kind of immediately go in and say, why are you doing this? Get off this now. But actually that just makes them shut down straight away. So we really want to seek to understand their experience, where they're at, why they're accessing these things, what their thoughts are on it, rather than judging them straight off the bat. So, recognizing that curiosity about sex and sexuality is very normal. It's a healthy part of growing up, and that seeking guidance about sex is also normal. And also that very often young people are exposed to pornography for the first time without their consent. So opening these conversations up by talking to them, listening to them, trying to understand where they're at. And you might be thinking, Tazga, this is so awkward. My child will never talk to me about pornography. Well, using safe resources or using TV shows, podcasts, news articles, TikToks as a stimulus to kind of naturally enter those conversations can be a really nice way to do that. And we have really brilliant resources, which will be shared with you at the end, on some kind of varying age appropriate content that you can watch or share or listen to or read with your young person, with your child, to kind of open up those conversations in a more natural, less awkward way. Okay, we're going to briefly touch on sexualized content online, because sexualized content isn't just pornography and it isn't just on porn sites. We're also seeing an increased amount of sexualized content on platforms like TikTok. Now, the biggest issue that we're seeing online is this polarization. So kind of two extreme ends of the spectrum. Now, we're seeing young women and young men, or boys and girls, being polarized. So their beliefs and their views on each other are becoming more far apart and more extreme. But we're also seeing this when it comes to sexualized content, and particularly for young girls. So what I've got on the screen here is kind of a spectrum of these two extremes. On the one side, we've got this ideal of how to be a woman, how to be a girl, that being very traditional, very archaic, and focusing a lot on kind of stay-at-home mums, obeying husbands, very traditional, often quite misogynistic values. Then on the other side of the spectrum, we've got, the opposite extreme of like hyper-liberated, hypersexual kind of young girls and young women online. And I won't spend too long going through these. Please feel free to kind of explore them on your own, at your own risk, I will say. We've got things like the tradwife trend on the more traditional side. And just to caveat, we're not telling young girls and young women it's bad to be a stay-at-home mum. Of course it's not, if that's what you choose to do. But it's more about this idea that they're being pressured into, this is the ideal way to be a woman. This is what's desirable. This is what's feminine. And also, if you look at some of the writing on these videos, it's about this idea of obeying or being submissive. And that's where we can fall into kind of ideals around control and dominance in relationship, which are unhealthy and abusive. On the flip side, we've got the opposite side of the spectrum where we're seeing a lot of hypersexualized content online. You might have heard of Bonnie Blue, who does very extreme content on platforms like OnlyFans, which is a platform where creators will put up a lot of pornographic, often content, which you can pay to view. And although this isn't on TikTok, she does have a TikTok account or posts on TikTok, kind of trailers or teasers to the content she'll put on OnlyFans, which young people are being exposed to. The Bop House is a group of predominantly young adult girls, so kind of 18 to 24, who are all living in a house, filming content for each other, again, promoting this idea of this is desirable femininity, this is what empowerment looks like, hypersexualization is desirable in a woman. So, you know, it's all about this. The problem that we're really identifying is that there are two extremes here, and often young people aren't getting that middle ground, that nuance, or that freedom to decide what they want femininity to look like to them, or what they want to feel their gender expression is. They're kind of being forced these narratives of what it is to be a young woman or a young girl. Okay. So we're going to whiz through these last bits because I'm conscious of timing. So I want to talk to you briefly about sextortion. Why? Sextortion is very interesting. It's one of the only kind of forms of sexual violence which predominantly or majoritarily kind of affects men. So as you can see, 91% of sextortion victims were male, mainly aged 14 to 18. And when we talk about sexual violence, it's often predominantly happening to women. So this is why it's quite an unusual and interesting topic to talk about. And the youngest victim was 11, and we're seeing a rise of these cases being reported to the police in recent times. The stats on the board are from 2024, but you know, we're seeing them rise into 2025 as well. Sextortion is essentially a type of online blackmail where criminals will threaten to share sexual pictures, sexual images, or sexual videos of you unless you pay money or do something that you don't want to. So what are the signs if you've got children, whether that be young boys or young girls, because it can happen to young girls still? What should you be aware of? Well, if there's someone trying to start a relationship with your child very quickly, someone that they don't know, perhaps it's just, again, on Snapchat, that kind of mutual friend that they don't actually know, but they've got a lot of mutual friends with. If they're friend requesting lots of children in the year group or in the class, and especially if they try to start a very intense romantic or sexual relationship very early on. And this could even look like this person sending explicit images to your child first. Now, who are the people doing the sextorting? It's not young girls and it's not young boys. It's usually men of middle age, 30s, 40s, often not even in the country. And so they will send an explicit image of a young girl, which is taken off the internet, to your child to kind of build that rapport, build that trust, which then makes them feel safe to send something back. They might be also quite pressurizing, quite coercive, and repeatedly ask your child to send sexual images or to do things they're not comfortable with. What they'll then do is, if your child then sends an image, is they will then say, well, I'm not actually a young girl, or I'm not a young boy, I'm a middle-aged man, or whoever I am, and I have your family, your friends' contacts, your school contacts. I'm going to share this image around unless you send me money, which is incredibly frightening, as you can imagine. So what can we do in this instance if this happens to our child? Ideally, we want to talk to them about this topic so that they're aware of the signs. And if they feel something's a little bit off, they come and talk to you. But if they do go through this, which it can happen, it's not the end of their world. There are steps in place that you can take to support them both kind of practically and emotionally. Sextortion is illegal. You can report it to the police online or in person, and you don't actually need evidence. So let's say your child blocks them, you don't have access to the text messages or whatever it's on, you can still report it. And really the important message is to stop communication immediately. You might feel in the moment, oh my gosh, let me just send this money to make it go away for my child. But actually, that's what they want you to do. And they will just keep trying to get more money out of you. Often they don't even have access to the contacts they're claiming to have access to. So blocking them is really important, stopping communication. In terms of supporting, again, the empathy is really important. They'll already be feeling huge amounts of shame, humiliation, guilt, fear. So really making sure that you remind them you're there for them, you are their greatest support. Avoid blaming them, kind of maybe empathize. I get why you might have trusted them. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Looping in the school safeguarding lead, and also considering other forms of mental health support, such as Childline, etc. How does this map onto image-based abuse then? Just to whiz through, I'll leave these stats up. So if you're watching this back, you can pause them now to read through them. But image-based abuse, essentially intimate image sharing or nude sharing, is very common amongst children. It is illegal to kind of take an image of yourself if you're a child that's intimate, to send it or to share it on. But I do want to emphasize that children aren't unnecessarily criminalized. So if your child does send an intimate image of themselves, it's unlikely they'll get a criminal record. It's more likely the person that receives that image and shares it onto peers, they're the one that's more likely to get criminalized. How do we support our child through this if they do go through this? Again, support system. But also, I want to inform you about Childline's report remove tool. It's a really brilliant tool that Childline, the charity, have created, where they can remove sexually explicit content of children from the internet very quickly. This is obviously if it's shared in public forums. If it's done through kind of private WhatsApp chats and stuff like that, it's not quite as simple. But they can take it down from the internet within a matter of hours, and it's really effective. Great, so I'm going to finish up. I know that I'm going to be cut off soon because it's 7 o'clock. But what I will do is share with you kind of some of the resources that we have. And, you know, Ms. Arthur, if you'd like to do a second session, which I'm more than happy to do, and record it and to kind of go through some of the online misogyny content, I'm more than happy to do that. At a later stage. But actually we have all of the content that we'll go through on our quick guides. So to talk you through the resources that will be shared with you through staff members, there is a parent reflection activity. This is really brilliant for you to reflect on your parenting, kind of how you were parented as a child, what your belief systems are now, what benefits your children, what perhaps is negatively impacting them, and how you might adjust and consider how you approach certain topics. Support services are really brilliant. It lists you all the support services if your child experiences any number of issues at school. Quick guides are really brilliant. They're one-page guides which take 5 minutes to read through, and they give you a brilliant summary on all the topics we've spoken about today, plus the ones we haven't managed to get around to delivering. So you'll get all the information there that you'll need that we would have spoken about this evening. Child personas is really about how to speak to different types of children, because we know not all children are the same. Some might come home and tell you every detail of their day. Others might just go, yeah, it was fine. So we've kind of developed different approaches to how to have these conversations with children, depending on what type of child they are, what personality they have. And finally, the parent glossary, a really brilliant resource of all the kind of slang language and words that young people are using, some of which is harmful, some of which is not harmful, but it's just to give you an overview of it. It's about 30 pages, so it's quite a read and it's quite entertaining at points. So it's really great to read it through when you have a moment. We also have, which is not on here, a parent and carer survivor guide, because we know that statistically, many of you viewing this today may have been through these experiences yourself of sexual violence, and therefore it might be really hard for you to have these conversations with your children more than perhaps someone who hasn't been through those experiences. So it's a guide on how to support yourself in having those conversations and also looking out for yourself as well. Now, what I'm going to leave you with is two really important things. The first one on the left-hand side is our really wonderful parent and carer community on WhatsApp. To explain it to you very briefly, it is a channel. When you scan that QR code, you'll be directed to WhatsApp. You will be added to our community. Just to let you know, when you join, your number is not shared, your name is not shared. All that comes up is, we had 120 people, now we have 121. So you're essentially entirely anonymous. It is also a one-way channel. So what that means is once a week, I will be sending in a parent and carer update. What does that look like? It looks like terms to be aware of, so language that young people are using, important articles or information on trends and topics that we talk about. It might be social media trends or just things that I think are really important for carers and parents to be aware of. As we know, the times move so quickly, so it's your kind of up-to-date resource that you can have access to. It's obviously entirely free, and you can also send us in questions that we can answer on that chat as well. So if you'd like to join, you can just scan it there. We have 160 parents in there currently, so you won't be alone. And if you wouldn't mind sharing some feedback on this evening or whenever you're viewing this video by scanning this QR code on the screen. I'll also share this with staff at Forest so they can send it out to you, both the WhatsApp and the feedback survey. We really appreciate it, just to know specifically about how you found the talk this evening or whenever you're watching it, and also what we could do better or what you'd like to hear more about. As I said, because we weren't able to kind of finish all the content, it's a lot to cover in an hour. Please do know that if it's something you would like, we would be more than happy to either provide a kind of recording, as will be sent out this evening, of the second half of the content, or we are more than happy to do a second date where you can attend live as well. So all I've got to say now is I hope you enjoy your evening, whatever you might be doing. And thank you so much to those of you that have joined live. We really appreciate your time. And just to remind you, you are incredibly powerful in supporting us to tackle these issues. And you know, there is so much to be done. It might seem like doom and gloom, but it absolutely isn't. The work that I do every day, I see the changes, even going into Forest, such a brilliant community. You know, we're making change every single day. Thank you. I've already seen some feedback there. I'll definitely take that on board. And as I said, the second session, hopefully we can address some of that feedback as well, whether that's recorded or live. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening.